Bing bong. I am live with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast. And for those listening on the video version on YouTube, thank you so much for listening on YouTube. Smash that like button, hit the subscribe to my channel. I'm nearing 500 subs as we speak. So shameless shill here. But I appreciate all the support and love from everybody. So that is greatly appreciated. Also, if you're listening on audio, any podcasting 2.0 apps such as Fountain. Thank you so much. There was a great response to the last episode with Wicked. I had two great boosts. So Doug and Droop said, a great show. Wicked did a great job of explaining concepts I knew about. But turns out I had gaps in my knowledge. So yeah, shout out to Wicked. He explained UTXOs, cold storage, all that kind of stuff. And then Barn Miner said, thanks for the shout out for the Bitcoin Bay Biz Workshop. So shout out to Barn Miner and Bitcoin Bay. So if you're in Tampa Bay, you're listening, you're local, we do have a Bitcoin Bay workshop for every single business owner that you could come. I believe that we'll be serving food. It essentially will allow you to learn a little bit more about, how you can use Bitcoin in your business, whether it's accounting, taxes, storage, that kind of stuff. So that's taking place on April 23rd. I don't think I currently have it in the show notes right now, but I'm going to add that. So for those listening on audio, that should be in the show notes, and those in the video, it'll be coming soon. So look out for that on Eventbrite. And then now, shout out to my sponsors. So do you want to go to the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world? Well, Bitcoin Miami 2023 is around the corner. It's in May, and you can use promo code Green Candle. That's all caps, one word, and get 10% off. So come hang out with Bitcoiners. I'll be down there. I'll be hanging out with a bunch of other people. There's going to be a bunch of other plebs, a bunch of other big names as well. Save 10%, use the promo code Green Candle, and stack some more sats with that 10% that you're saving. And come on down and hang out in Miami. And then lastly, shout out to Coddle Storage. So that's coddle.co. And you can use promo code Green Candle on there to get any kind of punch plates. He actually just sent me all these brand new ones here. So he's got, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that I've got some of these new 12 and 24 plated word ones where they're of all different sizes. So we got like some tiny ones. I don't know. I'm a little guy, so this looks a little bigger probably against my face. But yeah, go on there, get a punch plate for passwords or your seed phrases, and use promo code Green Candle for 10% off. All right, that was a mouthful. Enough of me just talking by myself. I got the man, the myth, the legend here. I got CK from Bitcoin Mag. Man, how you doing today?
Brandon, thank you for having me on, man. I am doing great. We are moving towards the Bitcoin conference, 42 days away. So my life is definitely very busy, but we are cooking up a storm. And I'll leak a little bit of alpha right here at the beginning of the show. But this morning, we made it official that Bitcoin Amsterdam is happening as well. So keep an eye out for that to all the listeners. But we're doing the Bitcoin conference. We're doing Bitcoin Magazine, getting ready to launch a new one. And just a lot of stuff is happening in Bitcoin. A lot of stuff happening at Bitcoin Magazine. Good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So let's back it up a little bit. Well, who is CK? How did you get to Bitcoin Magazine? Like, tell us the orange pill story and the whole nine.
Man, well, I've done like 100 podcasts now, and I tell my orange pill story all the time. So hopefully I can do it succinctly. But I got into Bitcoin in 2017, pretty much right after Bcash happened. So that was like fall of 2017. So I wasn't that OG. I didn't get the Bcash airdrop, but I was there to kind of see the fallout of like the block size debate. So I feel lucky that I was part of that, and I could see that on Twitter. But pretty much I was living in San Francisco, working as a salesperson in tech. I was on my second startup, and I'd kind of seen fundraising. I had kind of seen what happens in Silicon Valley, what that lifestyle is like, what those companies are like. I was living in San Francisco. Those are all my friends. And 2017, like one of the big things with that bull market was the ICO mania. And a lot of people got caught up speculating on ICOs. And I entered Bitcoin, and I would say within like 3 months, I saw through the ICO mania, which is pretty fast for most people. But I think it's just because I was primed to be skeptical, and then on top of that, I just saw what fundraising looked like for businesses, and ICO mania was just a fucking mania. Like that was some wild shit. I was going to some parties in Silicon Valley, and they were just absolutely absurd. And these ICO projects with no businesses at all were like raising 10x more than like a real startup. So it didn't take that long for me just to Google what's wrong with ICOs, what's wrong with blockchain. And the only people saying anything that was like relevant were Bitcoin maximalists. So, within like 3 months of kind of like getting into Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, I discovered the Bitcoin maximalists. It was pretty obvious even then that they were the smartest people in the room by far. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. 2 weeks before Christmas 2017, I quit my job. And if you look at the chart, like that's the tippity top of that bull market. So I quit my job at the top literally, and I had no plan, but I bought a ticket to the North American Bitcoin conference, and I met the people at BTC Inc. Someone who doesn't work for us anymore. His name was Bryce. He was a CRO. Shook my hand. I said, "Sales, Bitcoin, San Francisco." He gave me his card. He said, give me a call. I think we could make something work." And then, that was like late January, mid February. I was working here, and I've kind of been through the roller coaster of a bear and bull market here at Bitcoin Magazine. I've seen the company like grow up in front of me, and went from salesperson to media person to operations person. Now the GM at the company, and it's been a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun, kind of being in Bitcoin around 5 years now. But that's my general Bitcoin story.
Yeah, man, it sounds like a wild ride to say the very least. But, would you say, I guess, like, it seems like everybody's Bitcoin story, they've kind of shit coined some way, shape, or form here or there. But yours, you had a little bit more exposure to, I guess, the ICO craze when you were in, Silicon Valley. You're describing a little bit of those parties and kind of the wildness of people raising here or there. So do you think that kind of, I guess, helped you maybe avoid the shit coining, or did you kind of get into that a little bit here or there, as everybody kind of does at the beginning of their journey?
Yeah, I think there's two distinct versions of shitcoining. There's shitcoining like, wow, this token's the future. And then there's shitcoining like, I'm going to trade and try to get more Bitcoin. So very quickly, I got onto the DCA Bitcoin train. Like that was pretty much a no brainer. Um, but I would say that going from the like, oh, I'm going to try to speculate and trade on shitcoins to make more Bitcoin, it took me a little bit to get over that. At this point, I'm just like so busy working in Bitcoin that like I don't have time for that shit. And I'm just focused on Bitcoin. But I pretty much never had the like, oh, this shitcoin is the future. I was never convinced by any of that. How I started doing media in the space, I was doing a podcast with David Hoffman, who is now like this big wig at Bankless. But we used to argue Bitcoin versus Ethereum. And before that, David and I actually went to college together, and we were just our only friends that were into crypto. So we're like, all right, well, like, we don't agree, so let's just like hash it out and see what we could do, and that kind of launched both of our careers.
Yeah, that is interesting. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I don't know. I started this with a buddy Dan, and we kind of have like, I guess, similar views on Bitcoin and crypto. And yeah, he ended up getting a job in the industry, so he couldn't continue on with me. But it was kind of like a similar thing where we were the only two really talking about it in our friend group. So we kind of just started this green candle stuff to see where it goes. But yeah, so now that brings you into, obviously you're working at Bitcoin Magazine now. You guys are doing great things. You're having a bunch of writers come in and out. And then, yeah, the Bitcoin conference, right? This big old event that you guys have been putting on for quite some time. So, I guess what's your most, most thing that you're looking forward to when it comes to the conference? And yeah, how does that whole like scenario go? Like planning it, like how much involvement do you have with putting together this huge event?
Really good question, Brandon. I've described this event as like a massive, massive project. Like think of a project with like 10,000 outputs. 10,000 inputs, 10,000 outputs. So many stakeholders. Like everyone hates us because they know how important the event is, and like there's always something that is like gonna like fall short, disappoint you, or not be in line. Like it's just there's too many people to please. You can't please them all across the entire spectrum of this huge like 3-day thing. So it's wild. Like I don't know how long I can be in the events business because it's just absolutely taxing. And we're doing multiple events a year now, so it's not just the Bitcoin conference, but it's other Bitcoin conferences bringing that same energy to other places across the globe. So that's a really exciting opportunity. Is just continue to feed the Bitcoin community, which just they want as much stuff as possible. But man, it is a lot of fun too. So in my role, like I kind of help people in every role. Like I can't be Superman or anything like that, but it's really just kind of like uh, keeping the team marching along, like, chipping away at this massive project and putting ourselves in position to pull it off. And then trying to help and liaison with the community as much as possible. We depend on the Bitcoin community to put this event on. Like, there's a reason this is one of the biggest events in like the entire fintech space, soon to be the entire energy space, because I think this is a fintech sovereignty energy conference. Those are kind of like the kind of macro components of Bitcoin to some degree. So this event is like this instantiation of what is happening in Bitcoin once a year. And, that's a fleeting thing too. Like it's gone from conference to conference, but for the last, 2019, 2021, 2022, it's been this event. It's going to be this event in 2023. So I'm really excited to do something special. But yeah, I don't know. It's been awesome to see it grow too. 2019, 1,900 people, 2022, 25,000 people. That's pretty epic.
Yeah, so I don't know how much you could dive into the sponsors, but it's been a big like kind of wave and talking point that Shell is now one of the bigger sponsors of this conference. And like you kind of said, it seems like it's getting more to like I guess the energy side of things, where I mean there was mining panels on the last couple and things like that. Do you think that there's going to be, I guess, a little bit more of a focus on that when it comes to this one?
Yeah, well, so Bitcoin 22, we had an entire mining stage. So we're going to have the mining stage again. We have 4 stages. Nakamoto stage, which is the main stage. We have the open source stage and open source lounge area. We have an industry stage and then or slash enterprise stage. And then we have a mining stage. And yeah, energy is woven throughout the content at the event. Sponsors, no sponsors, miners by themselves are one of the biggest elements of Bitcoin and one of the biggest elements of the stakeholders of our conference. There's an entire miner area and an entire miner museum at the event where like pretty much the entire history of Bitcoin ASICs will be displayed there. And Bitcoin miners are one of the growing cohorts of people that are involved in the entire energy space. And that's just going to continue to grow. So this year, there's a huge miner presence. I think if you look at the hash rate, Bitcoin mining has never been a better business to be in. It might be harder than it was in the past, but it's a real executable business that people are operating real companies doing at large scale, and it's really impressive, honestly. So I don't think that's going to change. And yeah, I think this event is a fintech and energy event. And, as Bitcoin becomes more relevant in more fields, the scope of this event continues to increase too. So a lot of potential here. Really exciting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's dive into, I guess, a little bit of that, like on the mining end of things, because I think this is like the first cycle that we've really seen like a, bear market, but we've seen the hash rate kind of increase. So it does seem like, although, like you kind of said, that mining has maybe gotten a little bit more difficult. They've had to, worry about cost a little bit more, or, find unique ways to whether it's reuse power from, capturing that flare gas or using some sort of natural energy source. Miners have kind of had to get creative. So do you kind of see this as like I guess a pretty bullish signal that, we've kind of seen hash rate continually increase throughout, this bear market, and, although the price has been kind of depreciated?
Yeah. I don't really like look into even like the 1 year kind of trends that much as I look at like the big trend. But yeah, I mean, my personal expectation is, in the next 10 years, mining is one of the most like central pieces of infrastructure on the planet. So, this is just the beginning. I think you can't be a legitimate energy producer that is competitive in the future without Bitcoin mining. And then because of Bitcoin mining, it will open the door to so much more energy capture that our frame of energy today will look like, I don't know. We live in in an energy illiterate world still. It's like a lot of the world still doesn't even have electricity. Like I think Bitcoin is going to be the incentive that changes that, and it's going to be like things are going to play out in ways that like none of us are smart enough to predict. Like it's going to be wild, but it's going to be because Bitcoin changed the kind of like the incentives in the energy production game. So it's going to be huge. And yeah, I think hash rate's going to continue to go up. Like there's only one direction. It's up. It's not going to stop.
No, that's a great point, and I agree 100%. I think that's going to be some incentives, to continue to utilize energy sources and find creative ways to mine, and whether that's use the runoff heat or something along those lines. I think there's going to be a lot of development when it comes to the mining space, to say the least. I saw you went off mute there, so I don't know if you want to kind of add anything to what I just said there or no.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to get the listeners super bullish because I think a lot of Bitcoiners are really bullish on like Bitcoin as a sound money and what that does to the world. But I would say like distributed proof of work might be have an even bigger impact on the world than uh, sound money in a digital age. Like that might be ludicrous, but I think like the beautiful thing is Bitcoin has both. Like Bitcoin is just even more of a blessing, if you will, because it solves so many problems. But really, like Bitcoin is going to have such a positive impact in so many areas of our lives. But energy is going to be huge. Imagine people who don't have any energy today, which is like a double digit percentage, 30 plus percent. They have energy. Like, what does that do to the planet? Like, these people can access the internet. Now they can contribute to society. A lot of these people have no way to buy something on the internet. Like, imagine your life without like that basic ability. And Bitcoin can change that. It's going to be crazy.
100%. And I don't think people like kind of, I guess, at first when people start going through the rabbit hole, they kind of understand the decentralization aspect of it. But I don't know if like, they like kind of fully grasp how like important that is. I don't know if you saw this. It's behind a paywall, so I haven't been able to read the article. But this article was published by the Wall Street Journal like 6 hours ago from this recording. So earlier this morning. And the title is Decentralized Cryptocurrency Markets Threaten U.S. Security Treasury, U.S. Security, the Treasury says. So, I mean, like, it seems like we're getting to that point where now politicians are kind of waking up to it and like understanding that they want to keep that, centralized control. I guess, I've heard you on a few other podcasts about like, I know that you're a sovereign individual enthusiast and kind of, ascribe to that theory and everything like that. So, do you think we're getting kind of closer to the, I guess, quote unquote, now they fight us stage where, we're going to have to, I guess, really understand how we're utilizing cold storage and some of these other methods to, store and transact Bitcoin and other things like that? Because, it seems like there's going to be a target on decentralized cryptocurrency, and the only one that's truly decentralized is Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think people need to be as strategic as possible with their Bitcoin and need to be thinking about what the future could hold and what the existing power structure might want to do in that transition. So it's super important. Some alarming stuff is happening at the same time. Some bullish things are happening. And I think one of the things that is really exciting about Bitcoin is its advantages over gold. Gold has really been this amazing money, but it just kind of like hit this peak where technology, commerce, all of that stuff sped up, and gold just could not be the money anymore. And that left an opportunity for fiat to kind of fill the void and credit to fill the void and all this crap. And now here's Bitcoin. So um, filling that void with like a sound money on the internet, it's also just an insane kind of game changer. So I'm kind of lost where the question was going, anyways. So I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But yeah, I kind of want to get into, you mentioned at the beginning of like some of the doom and gloom stuff that's going on, right? So some of the negative things on the outside, but I mean, I think it all kind of ties into Bitcoin and how resilient Bitcoin's been during all this. So obviously, we've seen Silicon Valley Bank. They were funding a lot of these, shitcoin projects. Kind of a lot of these growth tech companies were having their money in this bank, and there's a bank run. That I had a full episode on it and everything like that. So people, they want to listen to it, check out the Macro Insights podcast on that. But regardless of all that, we're kind of we're having like potential of a bank crisis, I guess, in the United States. Maybe it's been overblown and whatnot, but it seems like Bitcoin is kind of holding resilient. So I guess in amidst of all of this, I guess banking situation and kind of woeful economic outlook in the future, I guess how do you view Bitcoin has been responding, and why do you think it's been I guess so resilient against all of this?
Yeah, I mean, part of this I think is like Bitcoin's moment a little bit. Part of it is sellers are exhausted and we got to a technical bottom. I don't know if that's actually a reality, but that's what people say. Um, Part of it is like, the Bitcoin cycles. I think Preston Pitch said something that was super interesting, which is that like the Bitcoin cycles are almost like programmatic destruction of fiat. Like it's almost like Bitcoin getting more valuable over time. If you like layer the charts over each other, like they look so similar that it almost looks like it's like this programmatic destruction of fiat. So I mean, man, it's when you like try to think about how that. Yeah, I mean, like when you try to think about like how these cycles play out, how Bitcoin is responding to the current situation in the world, it like you kind of question like, is Bitcoin even responding to this stuff, or is this just like how the supply and demand works, as it is releasing blocks and it's being adopted on a specific curve. So that's a little tangent to be like, I don't know what the fuck is happening, right? Like the whole spectrum of how Bitcoin is being adopted, like we're just all speculating. But it feels like, right, to answer your question, it feels like this is Bitcoin's time, right? Like Bitcoin's price went up because banks are starting to fail and people are turning to Bitcoin. And I know that insiders did turn to Bitcoin, right? People who already trust in Bitcoin, they're like, yeah, I'm taking my money out of the bank and putting it into Bitcoin. That feels way safer to me. But I don't know how many people who didn't feel comfortable with Bitcoin were converted yet. Like I feel like we're not quite there yet. So we'll see. Like it seems like this Project Choke Point 2.0, like it feels like it's a real thing. It feels like Bitcoin's gonna be collateral damage for shitcoining. And regulators are gonna kind of go after a lot of stuff in one like big swoop. So we'll see what happens. 2024 halving and a presidential election. It's going to be super political. Bitcoin, I think, is going to be a big topic. Um, People are saying bullish things. People think that Bitcoin's price is going to be really high by the conference, right? They're like, it's going to be double where we're at the conference. Like, I mean, I hope so. That would make my job easier. That's for sure. But gosh, like it's been chopping right now for a minute. Like it could fight these levels for a month and a half. Like that'd be tough, but it's totally in the realm of possibilities. And in terms of the banking crisis, things are looking bearish for the economy. Like oil production is going down. Oil production, the only thing going down faster than oil the only thing going down faster than oil production is oil demand. So oil demand is actually going down faster than oil production, and usually that's a leading indicator for economic economic activity is lessening. Another indicator is shipping rates from China are like the chart is just straight down and then a plateau. You know, uh, they're nothing like they were in 2020. They're nothing like they were in 2019. Like it's looking bad. There's a whole bunch of other indicators that just don't look good. So, um, yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be more stress. There's definitely going to be more issues. We'll see if people turn to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's an interesting point that you made there. Is like, what can we really equate to what's going on to like the Bitcoin kind of like leveling off? I think when you're when you're on Twitter all the time or like checking out the news or everything like that, it seems like all these economic signals are kind of doom and gloom. So when Bitcoin's kind of holding true to all of this, you want to think that, oh well, Bitcoin's being resilient, but how can you really equate the two? I mean, it's difficult to say, and I agree with you on that point where it's like, all right, well, if you really like zoom out on the Silicon Valley Bank, it was one bank that was very poorly mismanaged, and as far as like a percentage wise of the overall banking industry, it was pretty small. And generally speaking, over the years, regional banks kind of get swallowed up. But the reason that this one made so many headlines, it seems like, is because the involvement of a lot of startups and crypto and everything like that. So I think that's
Big
why.
money, big money stakeholders
Yeah, exactly. And
that
like
that got that got a podcast and demanded that their accounts and their innocent startups have their funds returned to them and be covered. I mean, it's not. I don't want to brush under the rug. I think it's the first of many, right? And it sometimes takes like 18 months for this stuff to play out. So like this is definitely an opportunity for Bitcoin. I just like I don't know how much of this Bitcoin price action is due to SVB.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you there too, right? I mean, like we don't know if we've hit the bottom or not. If you look at some of the chart guys on Twitter, they've probably said that we've done that already, and we're kind of creeping up as we're nearing the halving next year. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where we're at in the cycle. I don't really know. I don't really like to call into the price action or anything like that. But you kind of brought up adoption, which I think is pretty interesting. So obviously, at the Bitcoin conference, you can pay with a lot of things in Bitcoin. Obviously El Salvador and a lot of other places seem to be starting to accept Bitcoin. I believe you're in Nashville, if that's correct, where Bitcoin Magazine's kind of headquartered. So you guys have like a little Bitcoin citadel going on there, and in Austin, and some of these other places too around the globe. So as far as like, I guess the Nashville Bitcoin scene from an outsider, I haven't been to Bitcoin Park yet or anything like that. I've been to one Nashville meetup. So for somebody who's basically not really been around the scene in Nashville too much, like how is adoption going on that like city level? Obviously Bitcoin Mag's there and everything, but does the average normie, I guess have some sort of awareness to Bitcoin somewhat there, or none at all?
Yeah, I would say like it's definitely a hub for the Bitcoin community. So there's a lot of Bitcoiners here because Bitcoin Park is here, Bitcoin Magazine is here. There's these monthly events that are happening. It's just a really great hub. It's also kind of like a hot spot for people to like come together. It's they call it Nash Vegas. It's like one of the top bachelorette party places. Like it's like a happening in the zeitgeist city. So it's just like a good spot to be. I would say Bitcoin adoption is like in terms of like P2P and like at stores and stuff like that. it's okay. You know, you can go to the farmer's market. There's like a really great farmer. His name is Josh. Yeah, he'll sell you meat for Bitcoin. There's a few places here and there. There's Bitcoin ATMs, but I'd say it's more like the community is here. You know, you can definitely buy stuff at Bitcoin Park with Bitcoin. That's the only thing they accept. We have a little store, Bitcoin Magazine, the Bitcoin Magazine Art Gallery. We accept Bitcoin, and there's a bunch of other stuff just kind of around. You know, some food trucks. I think it was like it may have been like a Middle Eastern food truck. They accept Bitcoin, but yeah, it's not like, you know, an entire street accepts Bitcoin or anything like that. There's definitely more developed places for sure, but there's a lot of Bitcoiners here. That's for sure. There's a lot of like just like the Citadel part. I think is definitely very true.
Yeah, and that kind of as an outsider looking in, I feel like I got to make a trip up there to kind of experience it all, because I spent some time in Austin and I got to see, kind
Come
of
on
what.
down next week, man.
Yeah, well,
There,
I
yeah,
don't know
there's a
about
whole week of
next week,
things.
but oh, do you guys have a big event going on next week?
Yeah, yeah, Bitcoin Park.
Oh, okay.
But
Well,
every
maybe.
month. I think it's like every second week.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll have to make a trip out there now. Before yeah, I'll have to make a trip
Now
out
you
there
know.
at the end of the year. Yeah, now I know. But what one thing I do think, as far as like adoption, whether it's, at a, I guess, a city level or other things like that, is I think, one thing that we're seeing in this, back to the banking crisis, is that people are kind of, I guess, realizing that, hey, like, my money in the bank isn't necessarily safe, right? Like, the current system that I grew up in, that, I was I guess bred to believe, or kind of maybe brainwashed, I don't know, to believe that, everything is working smoothly, and that the bank's always going to have my money, and that's the safe place to put it, and everything like that. I think this kind of woke up like a lot of average normies. So I think there's been two kind of big events that which are fairly recent, right? So we've seen the Silicon Valley Bank blow up, which made a lot of headlines. And then, in 2020, with the lockdowns, everybody kind of printing money, and then now they're kind of experiencing that massive amounts of inflation. So on that note, with like kind of I guess the economic state that we're in, obviously it seems like doom and gloom. We had the jobless reports come out today, and they were higher than anticipated. Powell has said higher for longer, that kind of stuff. So it seems like everybody's kind of paying attention to more of the macro events. Do you think that because of this, like, the average person is maybe not, I guess, awake to Bitcoin, but more so aware of, what they're spending their money on, kind of how much more expensive eggs are, for example, than they were a year or two ago, or maybe even gas? Do you think that they're kind of, I guess, understanding some of the cracks in the overall system?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now I would say Bitcoin. I define Bitcoin adoption as someone who is like taking custody of their Bitcoin, or the asterisk there is like, or they are like consciously abstaining, and like they could take custody, but they're purposely putting it in another situation. Like that's what I think is Bitcoin adoption, and I think that's a pretty good proxy for someone who is like now paying attention to what the H is happening. So right now we're at 0.01% of that in terms of the entire globe. We're at less than that, 0.001%. You know, there's probably like, 40 million people that are doing that. You know, there's 8 billion people. So you can put that in the calculator. It's a small number. So we got a long way to go, man. And people have gotten burned in other countries. I think America's experience is going to be pretty shocking to a lot of Americans. But like, I was just in Argentina, and they've been through this like 3 or 4 times in their lifetimes. So, a lot of people have been through this, and they just always go back to the dollar. So who knows how long it's going to take to kind of break that heuristic. But I'm pretty bullish on Bitcoin. I think people adopted cell phones in about 10 years. When it took about 10 years from like, hey, you can get an iPhone. Sorry, when I said cell phone, I meant like a smartphone. Took about 10 years from when you could get your hands on something that's like the right form factor, that was kind of like the right fit of like what was going to take off, and then grandma using it. Right. So 2008, that's when the iPhone came out. 2018, my grandma was using an iPad for sure. She'd probably been using an iPad in like 2015, 2014. So less than that. So my heuristic is like I kind of like layer that over Bitcoin adoption. Maybe it'll take a little bit longer because money is kind of sticky, but fiat's pretty bad. The banks don't work that well. Bitcoin works really well, and that's the key. Is like Bitcoin is simply it's like money that works. It's digital money that works. Can't fuck with it. Everyone else does not have that. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. Like that is a innovation that is pretty huge.
Yeah, to say the least. And you mentioned something interesting there about Argentina, and I kind of want to bring this up about how they, I guess reverted to the dollar, because it seems like countries globally are kind of trying to get away from that. Like BRICS nations have kind of gotten this headline that they're coming together, and potentially creating their own BRICS currency. However that's going to go. And we're having some countries now apply to get into BRICS. Mexico probably being one of the bigger names because it's our downstairs neighbor. There's a handful of others, I believe, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and some of these other ones as well. So it seems like a lot of countries are starting to, I guess, use either the Chinese yuan or some other currency in order to trade internationally, which is kind of showing some weakness in the dollar. So do you kind of I guess think that the dollar might fail before I guess Bitcoin succeeds, whether that's something like a digital Chinese yuan is created, or do you think like that there's going to be somebody that's able to, I guess, in a sense, dethrone the dollar before we get to, I guess, this hyper Bitcoinized world?
Okay, so great question. I'll do my best to answer it. I just want to caveat that, I'm not an expert. This is just me as like I would say like active observer of all these things. This is kind of like my speculation here. I do a show called Fed Watch with a really good economist. His name is Ansel Lindner. Every Thursday, so we did one earlier today, but we do it every single Thursday. On Bitcoin Magazine YouTube, and we talk macro, we talk Bitcoin, we talk what is happening around the globe. It's like a very global focused, very central bank focused type of a show, hence the name Fed Watch. But the thesis on that show, and I would say like I definitely agree with it, is that there's not going to be an alt fiat. Like the dollar is the last fiat. And the idea is what is happening now is like the whole dollar system is crashing down. It's falling apart. We see that in front of us. Who knows how long it'll take, but it's like that's the momentum. As that is breaking down, what actually happens is that like the dollar can become less desirable politically and strategically, and it can also slay all the other fiat currencies simultaneously. So it's going to kind of like the dollar is going to kill all the fiats on its way down. But with that being said, like we don't think that there's going to be an alt like the BRICS coin. I don't think that they're going to be able to ship it. Like they're not going to get momentum on it. Like maybe there'll be something here, maybe there'll be something there. Maybe there'll be a few years of like people actually trying to like barter with secondary fiat. But where's Bitcoin going to be? That's always the wild card, is like, where is Bitcoin going to be? When is it just going to be objectively obvious that it's an economic advantage to just adopt Bitcoin? Bitcoin is for enemies. So I don't know when that moment is going to happen or how desperate countries are going to get. But I really do think that it's going to be like the crumbling dollar system. And that includes all the fiats and then the rising Bitcoin system. And maybe there's a plateau where one crumbles and it like flatlines for a while, and then Bitcoin emerges. Maybe they still they cross each other, and Bitcoin is like the arc and saves us from max pain. It's too hard to tell. So I don't think BRICS coin is serious. I don't think it's going to be a real thing. I don't think people are going to use a Chinese CBDC. Like CBDCs versus Bitcoin is like internets versus the internet. Like, which one won? Like, I don't think anyone. Do you know name of any of the internet competitors that are being pushed? In the whatever let's call it, early 90s,
No, not a
80s,
single one.
90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever the Euro CBDC will be the same thing.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I was in a space the other day, just kind of listening to some, economists like argue back and forth about it, and it's like, at the end of the day, if you want to use this, BRICS currency or the digital Chinese yuan, you might accept it, but what are you going to do with it immediately after? Probably convert it into dollars because you need to, use it to be able to spend, and the store clerk on the corner is not going to accept this BRICS coin, whatever it is, or Chinese yuan. They're gonna, want to convert that into dollars.
I mean, dollars are just like no one's going to want to hold yuan, for the same reason that no one's going to want to hold the Bitcoin, because the CCP controls it and they have leverage over anyone who uses it. It's the same reason, right? So the incentives kind of go to like it turns into barter. Like literally it's like fiat barter. Like the only reason the fiat system like is scalable right now is because it's all converged to one. So if you go to this like bipolar world, like I don't think that there's going to be a very long time where there's like multiple currencies that like have big chunks. I think it's really going to coalesce around one. And I really do think it's going to just be Bitcoin adoption because there's no other option that works.
Yeah, that's fair to say. But because you have the show on the Fed, I kind of want to dive into that as our last little block here on this podcast. So obviously, they've made a lot of headlines, and it seems like, now the market, take for what it is. The market is very forward looking. They've projected, I think, 100 basis points of cuts by January last time I checked. So that could have been wrong, could have been updated by now, but it seems like the market's kind of calling for this Fed pivot. And Jerome Powell's been kind of, I guess, putting his foot down, so to speak, where he's been saying higher for longer. He's going to continue to raise and all this and that. But the market's been screaming for, a pivot. So, one, like, what do you think of the job he's been doing so far? And where do you think he goes the rest of the year?
Okay. So can I share my screen actually? Is that possible? You're muted if you're trying to actually talk to me.
Yeah, you can. You can do that real quick. There's a present button on the bottom, so go ahead and do that and pull it up.
Okay. Yep, here we go.
There it is.
So this is a chart from FedWatch. So this is US Treasury yields. What you see with these lines is the Fed raising rates. And then what you see with all these different squiggly lines, these are different bonds. So these are different treasuries. So I think the black is the shortest term, and then the green is the longest term. But pretty much what you can see is that very clearly rates were up and the Fed chased rates. And now the Fed is diverging from where rates are going. Rates are going down, and then the Fed is going to chase the rates. So why I'm showing you this is because the real question is the Fed even in charge? I think this chart shows you pretty clearly that they're not. Like, so what they're doing is like they're pretending to be in charge, and they're like following. Like, look how much higher rates got before they even started. Like, so they're saying rates are this, and then these are what the rates were. Like, everyone was just ignoring them. And then they're like, oh, we're raising rates. And they didn't even catch up until November. So that's when they like actually caught up. So it's a very interesting chart.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting to say the least. So you think that, I guess Powell in a sense is almost like looking at the market and kind of analyzing it in that sense and saying like, hey, this guy like essentially just like following the market. Maybe he's got his Bloomberg terminal open or what, but he's just not really, I guess, in charge. Because I mean, that is an interesting point though, because I mean, raising rates at this historic pace that he did, it seems kind of I don't know, it's like a ballsy play in a sense where it was just like shock the market in a sense where you're going to raise them so quickly that's how you're going to quote unquote combat inflation.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the chart. You could say that the market's expectation of his future rate drove them to front run it. That's an interpretation, but the way I interpret it is the market was first and he was chasing it the whole time. And now the market is signaling lower. It's saying the real rates are actually lower. And versus the Fed funds rate where they're setting their levels. So do they like no one in the market is respecting, their rates. So um does that mean he's going to chase? Does that mean something will break if he doesn't chase? Does that mean everyone is eventually going to realize as these things diverge that, oh, they're not in control? I don't know. Like, I don't think that they're in control. That's for sure. And that's why we Bitcoin,
Yeah.
because you don't have to trust Jerome Powell or anyone else to be in control.
Yeah, and that's a great point there because I think that that's another aspect of the decentralization that people don't really, I guess, grasp in a sense is that eventually in a Bitcoin hyper Bitcoinization or hyper Bitcoined world, you don't really need to have a Federal Reserve essentially like setting the interest rates or anything like that. Well, I mean, I guess if it becomes to lending, I guess I don't know how that would really work if you would be end up lending. Bitcoin, but you wouldn't need a central bank theoretically. You wouldn't need kind of a Federal Reserve, all this kind of stuff, and people could focus on some other things and other tasks, and maybe more some creative things, or helping sustain the world and other things like that. So, on that note, like I guess with like Powell kind of it almost seems like he's like you said kind of being controlled by the market, which is interesting. I haven't really heard that perspective before. I guess is that kind of always going to be the case? Like, where does it go from here? Because if Powell and the Fed kind of lets the market then dictate everything, then what's the point of having somebody in the Fed if we're just essentially going to have this decentral, not quote unquote decentralized movement of things, of interest rates and other things like that, if we just allow the market to control things.
Yeah, I mean, fighting the market is just something that doesn't work for a long time, or is not ineffective on any medium to long term uh, length. So really, what I think happens is like the market is happening, everyone is experiencing that. That's just life happening. And then there is impediments to the market, and there's confusion and information destruction and lies that are added into the market. That's what central banking does. So what Bitcoin is complete transparency on the base layer, complete transparency of the code, complete audibility of the supply. Um, it, you know, like Bitcoin is such an upgrade on gold, where if you wanted to verify gold, like right now I own gold, right? And the gold ounces are inside plastic that are sealed by the person that sealed it, that has credibility. Like, I don't have the ability to actually authenticate that gold. I am having to trust the person who minted it, sealed it in the plastic, and if I break the plastic, now no one will buy it from me until it gets authenticated. So like, it's some arcane shit. Like, I can validate all of my Bitcoin using my computer, and not only all of my Bitcoin, everyone else's Bitcoin too, right? So like, authenticating the entire supply, and everyone is free to do that. So it's just like, in terms of human sovereignty, like your ability to control your wealth, your ability as an economy, either as an individual actor or as bigger actors, to know what is actually happening with the market without distortion and lies and confusion, and the high priests of fiat getting on stage and telling you to pay attention to them. Like, imagine the productivity gains from that. Imagine the better allocation of capital that comes from that. It's like, that's the promise of Bitcoin. That's the promise of sound money.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So last question before we wrap it up here is I'll take one from Ben Sessions. So shout out to BTC Sessions. What makes you most bullish as we're like what you said 42 days away from this conference? So we're nearing up on a Bitcoin conference, and we've had a lot of craziness, and we've kind of gone through a lot of stuff in the overall macro environment that doesn't exactly seem, I guess, bullish going forward. But there's a lot of great things going on in Bitcoin. So what makes you more bullish or most bullish on Bitcoin going forward?
Oh man, I'm so bullish on Bitcoin. I wish I like came up with a very specific reason to be bullish. Um, I think that like Bitcoin is a little under attack in the West. It's attacked in the banking system right now. But at the same time, everything is good for Bitcoin. So what that does is it actually promotes self custody and it promotes peer to peer. So if you live in China, you can still get Bitcoin. But how do you do it? You text someone and then you do a peer to peer transfer, right? So just a completely different scenario, and that is much harder to squash even if everyone's on WeChat, right? So what you're going to see in places where they kind of like crack down or make it hard to transfer Bitcoin for fiat is you just see the emergence of this P2P layer and tools to make that P2P layer better, and that makes Bitcoin and the network and the users even more hardened. So I think that that's bullish. So bring on the weak attacks. There's a saying, when you come for the king, you best not miss. So Bitcoin's the king. Bitcoin's a honey badger. Like you get one shot, so you best not miss. And my bet's that they miss.
Yeah, I'm willing to make that bet as well. So CK, you've been very generous with your time, so I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell everybody what you got going on and where they can find you?
Y'all, I work at Bitcoin Magazine. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing you the most recent issue, the broke issue. We're about to drop a brand new issue. I can't leak the name, but very, very soon, like in the next week, we'll be dropping a new issue. So I personally think it's one of the best ones we've done. Our editors think it's the best one we've done. The cover is absolutely fucking sick, and we're doing a lot of cool activations associated with that. Next, after Bitcoin Magazine drops, we are going to be, within 3 weeks of the Bitcoin conference. So the entire Bitcoin world is coming down to Miami Beach, Florida. We are going to talk about everything Bitcoin. We're going to talk about everything energy. We're going to talk about everything financial literacy. We're going to teach newbies about Bitcoin. We're going to have, hardcore debates on stage. There's going to be the entire spectrum. We have 3 different passes online plus an after party. So go to b.tc/conference, check that out. And hey, ticket prices are high because it's late in the game. If you check out the lineup of speakers of all the things that we have planned, Bitcoin Week, all that good stuff, it's well worth its weight in sats. And if you need some help getting tickets, we have a lot of financial aid options. We have student tickets. If you're an open source developer, we're giving you industry passes, which is our 3-day pass for free. Obviously you need to use Brandon's code when you're buying, so that way you save 10% off. But it's well worth it. You got to go. It's really like a career changing, trajectory changing experience. Bitcoin conference is how I got my first job in the space, and look at me now. Came from the bottom. Now we're here. It's fantastic working in Bitcoin. So yeah, the Bitcoin conference, come meet me there. I'll be giving out issues of my favorite book, The Sovereign Individual. I just ordered like 8 copies. So just, the top of my suitcase, I stuff it with as many sovereign individuals as I can fit, and then give them out when people say, yo, give me one of those at the conference. I've been doing it every year. So come find me at the event, and yeah, it's going to be great. So see me in Miami.
Yeah, man,
Thank you.
great stuff. Yeah, and I couldn't echo that sentiment anymore. Really meeting people in person, I think, is the true value that this conference brings. If you want to just, if you want to work in Bitcoin, or if you just want to network with people, I think it's outstanding. You never know what doors that could open, what hands you can shake, and other things like that. So highly encourage everybody to go there and come find me or CK there and get a sovereign individual from him too. That's awesome stuff, dude. So CK, man, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. Pleasure.